military-industrial complex. You know, we hear about this all the time. Can you play this clip for me from this gentleman that I'm starting to really like? I'm a big fan of what India is doing and what India is capable of doing. Of course, they're part of BRICS, but I'm watching them very closely to see what I think they're going to be a very, very important force to be reckoned with the next 20, 30, 40 years. Dr. Subramanian Jaishankar, okay, who is an Indian diplomat and politician serving as the minister. He's a beast, right?
He is their Secretary of State, their foreign minister.
That's right. He is, I think, the second since, and he's become the second ever diplomat to be appointed as External Affairs Minister. Very sharp. I like what he says. In this question, someone's asking him a question about Ukraine. So I'll kind of preface what the question was, and then you'll hear his response. I'm sure you've seen this, where it's like, hey, so we're noticing everybody around the world is supporting Ukraine, but you guys are not. Why are you not? And this is his answer. Go ahead, Rob.
To grow out of the mindset.
No, refresh, because you skipped the first second. Yeah. Oh, you got to refresh and get that audio at the same time. So he says Europe has to grow out of this mindset.
Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. The world cannot be that Eurocentric as it used to be in the past.
So if you can pause this, I'm going to go to the sit-down you and Tucker hat. This was one of the ones a couple months ago, where he's talking about, I was never a Trump guy, and I've seen him, of course. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? He's out of his mind. And then one day he asked the question and says, who funds NATO? I'm like, who gives a shit about who funds NATO? And you remember this exchange with him. And he said, then I started looking. I was like, why are we doing this much money? Why are we putting so much more? He says, the more and more I saw him asking this question, I'm like, okay, these are very, very good questions. So why do you think for the longest time Europe has gotten away with everybody having to support them, but when it comes down to them having to pay the bill, they're like, no, it's kind of like a friend you go to a restaurant with, and I'll do another old-fashioned. Oh, pal, let's do another old-fashioned. And when it comes down for the bill, they get up and go to the bathroom. Europe seems to be doing that, and the other guy gets the bill, and the guy that gets the bill is U.S. The mindset of the military-industrial complex with what's happened with Ukraine, and yesterday, Joe Biden talking about the fact he was asked about, will we give them F-16 fighter jets? And Biden says, not today. Will you one day give them? I can't answer that question, but I think we ought to start training. And the U.S. official said we will not, turn away from any other country who wants to support them with F-16. Essentially what they're saying is we went from money to tanks to this to now we're probably going to give them some F-16s. So why is your concern so high, or a lot of people, why are so many people concerned about military-industrial complex? Why should that be a top priority for them as a concern?
There's a number of reasons why. Let's start with the most important that we're talking about. That as we sit here today, we are on the brink of nuclear war. That should be concerning to everyone. It should be even more concerning that we have people in positions of consequence and power and influence, both those who hold public office in the highest offices of the land, as well as those who don't, but who are just as influential, talking about the prospects of nuclear war as though it is just like any other kind of war, talking about the fact that Putin and his government has changed their policies to make it so that they can deploy nuclear weapons, whether they be tactical nuclear weapons or strategic nuclear weapons, if they feel that they are facing an existential threat, specifically omitting the words an existential threat because of a nuclear threat or nuclear weapons. So whatever they deem, for any reason, to be an existential threat will give them the authority to be able to deploy these nuclear weapons. The fact that we have these pundits, these talking heads, these government officials discussing the prospects of nuclear war as though it is something that can be won is shocking and extremely dangerous. Ronald Reagan had the most famous and most important statement after he negotiated some of these non-nuclear proliferation treaties, telling us very clearly, a nuclear war can never be won and should never be fought, period. things have only gotten worse. Things haven't gotten better since then. We have more nuclear weapons. They have become more sophisticated. A nuclear weapon would kick off a nuclear war that would destroy all of humanity. The military-industrial complex plays a major role in continuing to keep us in some state of war. Why? And some of them have even said it publicly. When we are at war, business is good. What is the cost? The cost comes out of our pockets, our bank accounts, the American people, the taxpayers. We are paying for it. Where those dollars could be and should be dedicated towards actually serving very real needs of people that we have right here at home. The military-industrial complex profits when you see a NATO expansion. That because who are the people that these NATO countries are buying weapons from? They're buying the weapons from our military-industrial complex. When you look at the U.S. footing the bill for NATO, number one, we should be able to ask questions like, why does NATO exist? Why are we the ones who are predominantly funding NATO? Well, with the predominantly of funding of NATO comes the very same leverage we were talking about earlier. Getting these European countries to act not necessarily in their own interest, but in the interest of those in power in the United States is done oftentimes through the leverage of money. So when Trump is saying, hey, you guys got to pay your own way, pay the 2%, my gosh, pay the 2% of your GDP that the rules require.
Common sense.
Many of them didn't want to, but then what comes with that, and you saw recently with, I think it was Macron's visit overseas into China, largely saying the same thing to the European countries. Hey, we need to stop being vassals of the United States. We need to make our own decisions based on what's best for our countries and what's based in the best interest of Europe. The criticism he got for having the audacity to say, hey, we should act in the interest of our own countries says everything that we need to know about the power and the influence and the money that goes behind these decisions. So there's an economic cost, of course, to us and the American people in our country, and there's the cost that comes to our safety, our security, and our freedom.
And the human costs of life.
Exactly.
Funding all these wars. I mean,
exactly.
Money's important, I get it, but not millions and millions of lives that are lost because of it.
Such a great point you're making. It's funny, Rob, if you can find that one clip that I asked you to pull up, the one where the lady says, how do you feel about the 500,000? You know which one I'm talking about. You know this
Madeleine
one here.
Albright.
Yeah, so this clip can't be played enough times. If you can play this real quick.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
We think the price is worth it. Okay. So,
and she is somebody who, throughout her life, all the way to the end, was lauded and worshipped by Democrats in the Democratic Party. She was a hero of the Democratic Party.
Was she not?
Bill
Under Clinton.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a while back. I don't know what this timeline, the interview is, Rob. If you can find the time, 98 or 96.
Mid-90s,
yeah, something like that. But, so you know how we're kids and we're like, we all think we're tough guys, right? And you're like, what'd you say? Yeah, I'm going to kick your ass. 96. I'm going to kick your ass. And then you're like, okay, maybe you got a punch in and everybody breaks it. That's yeah. Okay, fine, no problem. And that guy's a cool guy, right? It's funny, as you age, the real tough guys, they'll say, run when you get into a fight. What? So, for example, I hired this one guy who is worked Secret Service or president, and his job is to protect me. And I'm interviewing him. He's a little guy, not a big guy. He's not 6'5". You know what the typical bodyguards are, 6'5", 350 pounds. Offensive line. This guy's 5'10", maybe 160 pounds. I said, dude, do you know how to fight? Do you know how to do, like, what are you going to do if somebody says, let me tell you what my job is. He says, if you want to hire a big guy for commercial to be, physically big, I'm the wrong guy. Because that guy's going to fight the opponents. He says, my job is to make sure you're safe. I'm going to show you how to run the fast. I said, run? He says, we're going to run. If you want to live, we got to get your wife and kids out. We're running. I said, interesting perspective. Jocko, fight breaks out. You run. You don't go and fight. Okay. So right now, this whole thing with military-industrial complex. All right, listen, guys, let's create a proxy war. Let's get Ukraine to be the proxy behind closed doors. Let's help them out to go against Russia. because if shit hits the fan and this thing gets worse, guys, we can really make some money. Okay, fine. So you can create and instigate, then you make billions. But the part nobody thinks about is at an older age when you got wife and kids, if you get into a stupid fight, somebody may have a gun. And that gun means your life is over with. In this instance, what if you cross the line too much to the point where this man is publicly being humiliated, and all of a sudden he says, okay, you want to go there? No problem, guy. Fine. Let's roll the dice. Here's what we're doing next. And it's not 500,000 people. It's not 5 million people. Next thing you know, boom, 50 million, 100 million. Most people don't think that's possible. It's like when you sell life, I've been in the life insurance industry 20 years. When you sell life insurance, like you'll hear a lot of times these macho guys will say, I don't need life insurance. I'm 38. 2 years later, I get a phone call from the wife. Remember that one time my husband didn't want to buy? He died. No, I'm not. I don't have anything left. I don't know what to do. Okay, we hear stories like that. How close and how possible is it? Like, okay, a lot of people will say stuff on podcasts and shows. You've been in the military. I stand corrected, not a major or lieutenant colonel, right? You've been to Iraq. You've been to Kuwait. You've been part of a lot of these conversations. Realistically, how likely is it that this thing can get very ugly now that we're willing to entertain the idea given these guys F-16s?
Exactly. That decision will further escalate it. We are the doomsday clock that's reported every year. We are closer to midnight now than ever before. The question of likelihood and how possible, it is very possible, and we are in a position where it is very likely and becoming even more likely the more this war is escalated and the longer it goes on. And we're facing two great risks here. Number one is the scenario you're talking about. If Putin finds himself in a position where he feels like he has nothing else to lose and he is facing this existential threat, it's not a matter of guessing. They have already said they will retain the right to deploy nuclear weapons. How, where, who remains to be seen. That prospect is very real. The second prospect that is just as real and perhaps just as, if not more dangerous, is a situation where there's a miscalculation or there is an unintentional spark that causes that to occur. We saw this through the Soviet Cold War. There were the risk of nuclear war and nuclear weapons being deployed because of misunderstandings, miscommunications, miscalculations. We see something coming in the radar and we thought it was a nuclear weapon. There were so many close calls where nuclear weapons were almost launched because of mistakes rather than out of intention. So in both of those situations, whether intentional or unintentional, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that we could find ourselves tomorrow, in a week, a month, or a year facing the reality of a nuclear attack and nuclear war, the nuclear fallout that comes after the blast, the nuclear winter that comes after that kills all the crops and takes away people's ability to live. The gravity of this is difficult to describe because it is so immeasurable.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.